December 11, 2025. Silver just shattered through $63 per ounce. That's not just another commodity rally, that's a warning signal flashing red across global markets. And what happened 3 weeks ago in Beijing might be the most significant economic chess move of this decade. While you were focused on holiday shopping and year-end planning, something unprecedented unfolded in the precious metals market. A single announcement from China's Ministry of Commerce has reportedly sent shockwaves through industries you interact with every day. Your smartphone, your car, the solar panels powering your neighbor's house. All of it depends on one critical element that just became a geopolitical weapon. Here's what nobody is telling you about this silver explosion. This isn't market speculation. This isn't investor hysteria. This is strategic economic warfare disguised as administrative policy. And if history is any guide, we just crossed a threshold that changes everything. I'm not a financial advisor. This isn't financial advice. What I am about to show you is educational analysis based on publicly available information that connects dots most people are missing completely. October 30th, 2025. China quietly announced new export controls on silver. Not a ban. Not an embargo. Just new licensing requirements and national security reviews starting January 1st. Sounds bureaucratic, right? Sounds routine. That's exactly how they wanted it to sound. But here's what happened next. Shanghai silver inventories collapsed 40% in 3 weeks. Physical silver premiums in mainland China exploded to double the global spot price. Chinese buyers are reportedly paying $128 per ounce for actual metal, while paper contracts trade at $63. Think about that math for a moment. When physical reality diverges from paper prices by 100%, that's not market inefficiency. That's a system breaking down in real time. Meanwhile, Western mints are selling out. London Metal Exchange inventories have hit multi-year lows. Major institutions are demanding physical delivery instead of paper settlements. We're talking about orders worth 350 million ounces. That's more than the entire annual global surplus, according to most industry estimates. Now here's why this matters to your daily life. Even if you've never bought an ounce of precious metal in your life. Your smartphone contains half a gram of silver. Not much, right? But multiply that by 2 billion phones manufactured annually. Your electric vehicle uses between 25 and 50 grams. Solar panels require 20 grams each. And here's the part that should terrify every tech executive on Earth. Artificial intelligence data centers are among the biggest silver consumers in modern history. Every server powering ChatGPT, every GPU training the next generation of AI models, every high-speed connection enabling the digital economy relies on silver-coated components for heat management and conductivity. Industry forecasts suggest AI alone could consume 200 million ounces by 2030. Defense applications tell an even more critical story. Missiles, radar systems, guidance computers. The Pentagon reportedly consumed 15 million ounces in 2024. And here's the problem that keeps military planners awake at night. The United States produces only 14% of its domestic silver supply. Just 14%. Everything else is imported. But here's what most analysts are missing completely. China doesn't mine the most silver. They produce roughly 6% of global output. So why does their export policy matter? Because China dominates something more important than mining. They control the refining process. Raw silver ore is useless until it's processed into high-purity industrial-grade material. China built the infrastructure to refine silver from around the world, then distribute it globally as finished product. They positioned themselves as the critical bottleneck in the supply chain. And 3 weeks ago, they closed that bottleneck. This is where pattern recognition becomes crucial. Because when I studied this situation, I found 3 eerily similar historical moments. Same structure, same progression. Same outcomes. And in each case, the dominant economic power faced serious decline. Stage 1 is dependency. A powerful nation builds critical infrastructure around a single commodity. Their factories depend on it. Their military requires it. They assume unlimited access because the system has always worked smoothly. Stage 2 is weaponization. The supplier realizes they're holding strategic leverage. They begin restricting exports gradually, testing responses, creating scarcity while citing administrative delays and regulatory compliance. Stage 3 is crisis. Prices surge. Industries slow production. The dependent nation scrambles for alternatives, but the timeline is compressed. Supply chains are already disrupted, panic sets in. Stage 4 is realignment, industrial dominance shifts. Currency weakens. Military advantages diminish. A new global order emerges from the chaos. Let me give you one historical example that mirrors exactly what I see happening right now. Around 1870, Britain controlled 60% of global manufacturing. The Royal Navy dominated maritime trade. They were the undisputed superpower of their era, but they made one critical mistake. They became heavily dependent on German steel imports. For decades, the arrangement worked perfectly. Germany supplied raw materials. Britain manufactured the machines, ships, and weapons. Everyone prospered. Then around 1890, Germany started creating delays in shipments. Not officially. That would have been an act of war. Just bureaucratic complications. Extended quality inspections, administrative reviews. British factories experienced slowdowns, shipyards missed delivery deadlines. Steel prices tripled by 1900. Britain attempted to develop domestic steel capacity, but they were already behind schedule. The infrastructure development took years. The costs were enormous. When World War I began in 1914, Germany's steel advantage translated directly into military capability. They outproduced Britain in artillery, machine guns, and submarines. Britain survived the war, but they never fully recovered their industrial dominance. By 1945, the United States had emerged as the new global superpower. Same pattern, different resource. The entire transition took less than 50 years. Here's what fascinates me about China's current strategy. They learned this lesson through direct historical experience. Around 1800, China was the world's largest economy. They produced everything Europe desired: silk, porcelain, tea. But China demanded payment exclusively in silver. By 1830, China had absorbed roughly 50% of global silver production. This created a severe problem for Britain. Their silver reserves were depleting. Their economy was hemorrhaging wealth eastward. So Britain found an alternative solution: opium. They flooded China with opium from India. Reversed the silver flow, turned China's surplus into deficit. When China attempted to stop the opium trade, Britain invaded. The Opium Wars followed. China lost. They were forced to open ports, cede Hong Kong, and accept European dominance for over a century. But here's my key observation. China never forgot that lesson. 185 years later, they've positioned themselves on the opposite side of the equation. On the opposite side of the equation, where do I believe we are right now? Stage 3, the crisis stage. And here's the evidence that should make every American pay attention. The United States government designated silver as a critical mineral in 2025. They recognize the strategic threat. But recognition and action are two completely different things. Cumulative global silver deficits are estimated at 800 million ounces. 5 consecutive years of shortages. Production can't keep pace with demand. And here's the structural problem nobody wants to discuss publicly. 70% of silver comes as a byproduct of other metal mining operations. You don't simply open a dedicated silver mine when prices spike. You mine copper, lead, zinc, and silver appears as secondary output. Which means rapid production increases are structurally impossible. If copper demand drops, silver supply drops regardless of silver prices. The system has fundamental constraints that can't be engineered around. Reports indicate solar panel manufacturers are experiencing delays. Electric vehicle production is slowing. AI chip makers are desperately searching for alternatives. But here's the technical reality that keeps engineers awake at night. Silver's electrical conductivity is the highest of any element. Its thermal conductivity is unmatched. You cannot effectively substitute it in high-performance applications. Not for military systems, not for AI infrastructure, not for the technology that powers modern civilization. The Pentagon understands this. Defense contractors understand this. Silicon Valley understands this. And China understands that they understand. Industry analysts are forecasting shortfalls exceeding 200 million ounces in 2026. That's 15% of annual demand. Simply unavailable at any price. Current price is around $63 per ounce. Deutsche Bank forecasts $65 by end of 2026. Bank of America has similar projections. But here's what isn't being said publicly. If China maintains these restrictions, if deficits compound, some analysts are privately discussing $75 to $100 per ounce. not in 10 years. Within 18 months. And that might be conservative. So what happens next? There are only 3 realistic options, and none of them are pleasant for American consumers. Option 1. The United States pays whatever China demands. Prices surge. Industries pass costs to consumers. Your smartphone becomes more expensive. Your electric vehicle costs more. Your electricity bill increases because silver is embedded throughout modern infrastructure. We accept economic subordination disguised as market forces. Option 2. The United States sources silver elsewhere. We pressure Mexico, Peru, Canada, Australia to increase production. But these countries are already at maximum capacity. China can outbid them with $3 trillion in foreign reserves. Plus, China still controls the refining infrastructure. Raw silver ore requires processing. We'd be trading one dependency for another. Option 3. The United States builds domestic refining capacity. This is the only sustainable solution long-term, but it takes years, perhaps a decade. Environmental permits, construction, testing, equipment procurement. By then, China has locked in industrial advantages. Their AI infrastructure superior. Their green energy grid more advanced. Their electric vehicle fleet larger. And America is playing catch-up with higher input costs. Remember the historical pattern? Britain attempted to build steel capacity after depending on Germany. Too late. Now America is attempting to secure silver after depending on China's refining network. History suggests the timeline is already compressed. Here's what you need to understand about the next 90 days. China's export controls take full effect January 1st, 3 weeks from now. I expect prices could hit $70 per ounce by March, possibly higher if physical shortages intensify. If you work in industries dependent on silver, electronics, solar, automotive, factor this into planning now, not later. The window for easy adjustments is closing rapidly. Second, recognize the divergence happening between physical silver and paper silver. Chinese buyers are already paying double the paper price for actual metal. That gap represents a fundamental disconnect between futures contracts and physical reality. When that gap closes in Western markets, and it will, the price adjustment could be severe and sudden. Third, watch developments in the next 3 months. If China follows through with strict enforcement in January, if inventories continue declining, if more countries begin hoarding strategic reserves, we're locked into stage 3. At that point, the window for painless solutions disappears completely. But here's what really concerns me. This isn't just about one commodity. China is testing whether the United States will respond decisively. If Washington does nothing on silver, Beijing moves to the next critical mineral. Rare earths, tungsten, antimony, cobalt. This appears to be a systematic campaign to control the supply chains of the 21st century economy. Silver might just be the opening move in a much larger game. China spent 2 centuries watching the West control critical resources, watching Britain dominate steel, watching America dominate oil, watching the dollar dominate global trade. Now they're potentially reversing the dynamic with everything that powers modern technology. And America appears to be reacting late, again. 800 million ounces missing from global inventories, 4 historical stages playing out in real time. We're in stage 3, the pattern is clear, the timeline is established. The only question is whether you see it developing before everyone else does. January 1st is 21 days away. The chess pieces are moving. The question isn't whether this crisis unfolds. The question is whether you're positioned to understand what happens when it does. Does the silver market just sent a warning signal that most people will ignore until it's too late? China's export controls take effect in 3 weeks. Physical shortages are accelerating. And we're watching the same playbook that toppled previous superpowers unfold in real time. The only question left is whether you well recognize this shift before the rest of the world catches on.